Well, again, thank you all for coming to Books and Books by Harbor Shops and supporting independent bookstores. So a round of applause for doing that. We have a very special guest here for you today. He's a professor at Roger Williams University. He has spoken in front of Congress, and his writings have been published in The Nation, USA Today, and the Boston Globe. He's here today to discuss his latest book, Buckley. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Carl T. Bogus.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Pleasure to talk to you today about William F. Buckley. And maybe most speakers don't begin by telling you their political affiliation, but I think that that's important and necessary. I happen to be a liberal, and I know I'm speaking about a conservative icon and a figure who is beloved to millions of people, and so I think it's important that I confess my apostasy first. I happen to admire Buckley tremendously in many, many ways, but I also disagree with many of his ideas, and that may come through. But I wanted to be upfront with you about that. Historians debate whether history is made by individuals or by structural forces. If George Washington didn't happen to have lived, or James Madison, or Abraham Lincoln, would the United States exist? And if it did exist, would it be the same country that we know it to be? Would other people have come forth and filled their shoes and done what they did, or would things be markedly different? For our purposes tonight, the question is, if William F. Buckley Jr. had not lived, would conservatism be what it is today, or would it be different? Would there have been a conservative movement? Had there been a conservative movement, would it have achieved the same success that it has achieved? I'm going to put that question aside for the moment and try to circle back to it later. Let's start with who was Buckley? Who was Buckley? Well, he had 6 different careers, or he did things that would have been would have filled careers for 6 people and made them all incredibly successful. Let's start with the fact that he was a syndicated columnist. He wrote for many, many, many years, in fact, up until he died, a column called On the Right. At its height, it was published 3 times a week in 350 newspapers. He was one of the most widely read columnists in the country. He produced, in the course of his life, 5,600 columns. If you just took his newspaper columns and you published them in book form, they would fill 28 volumes this size. He did this extraordinarily well. He won the Best Columnist of the Year award in 1967, and so I suggest that if he had just been a syndicated columnist, he would have been enormously successful and enormously influential. But he also wrote 56 books. Now, 6 of those books happen to be collections of magazine articles and speeches, but that leaves still 50 additional books. Most were on politics, but he wrote about all kinds of other things. He wrote a very successful spy series. He wrote about sailing across the oceans. And in addition to these books, many of which were national bestsellers, many of them, he published countless magazine articles, not only in his own magazine, National Review, but in magazines that pride themselves on publishing the very best literature, The New Yorker and Esquire, and many other magazines, and he did this very well. He won an award for the best mystery in paperback one year. He won the Lowell Thomas Travel Journalism Award for the best travel article one year. If he had just done that, it would have made a very successful career. He was a public speaker. He was probably the most sought after, or certainly one of the most sought after public speakers in the United States. At his height, he averaged 70 talks a year. And he did this in large part to raise extra revenue to help support his magazine, National Review. He was the television host of Firing Line. He did this from 1967 until 1999. He still holds the record of, Firing Line holds the record of being the longest running show with a single host in history. He did this extremely well. He won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Achievement for his television show. And if he just had done the television show for 33 years and been that successful, it would have been an enormous accomplishment. And now I come to his signal accomplishment. He founded National Review magazine in 1955. He edited it up until 1990. He maintained legal control of it until 1999. And probably many of you know National Review bi-weekly or semi-monthly. Conservative Journal of Opinion is probably the most influential opinion journal in the United States on the left or the right. And it was a vehicle for redefining conservatism in the 50s and the 60s and creating a conservative movement. It's still an enormously influential magazine. Buckley was a man of extraordinary wit and charm. And for those of you who remember him probably remember this. He had panache. He had charisma. He did things that no one else thought of doing. Let me take you back in time to 1965 when he happened to fit in among all of these other things running for mayor of New York. He ran for mayor of New York on the Conservative Party ticket. He did it for two reasons. One was to communicate conservative ideas to a wider audience, not just to intellectuals who read opinion magazines and who watch highbrow shows, but to a wider audience. And he also did it to extinguish the political career of a rising liberal Republican, John Lindsay. He believed that Lindsay was a dashing, handsome, rising star in the Republican Party. He was a liberal, and he had not endorsed the Republican standard bearer, Barry Goldwater, in 1964, apostasy to conservatives. There was a battle raging for the heart of the Republican Party, and Buckley hoped that by running on the Conservative Party line, he would drain enough Republican votes away from Lindsay to defeat him. Let me take you back to his first press conference and read you some excerpts from his first press conference. Now, understand, the Conservative Party has persuaded Buckley to be its standard bearer to run for mayor. They're introducing him to the public for the first time. And this is how the press conference proceeds, portions of it. Reporter: "Do you want to be mayor, sir?" Buckley: "I have never considered it." Now you can imagine the Conservative Party officials standing there aghast. This is their candidate. What is he doing? "Do you think that is something at present that should be considered?" Buckley: "Not necessarily. What is important is that certain points of view should prevail. Whether you or I administer those points of view is immaterial to me, assuming you are a good administrator." Reporter: "But you were asking people to vote for you. If you win, will you serve?" Buckley pauses as if he's considering this question for the first time. "If elected, I will serve," he says. Reporter: "Do you think you have a chance of winning?" Buckley: "No." Reporter: "How many votes do you expect to get, conservatively speaking?" Buckley. Conservatively speaking, won. And a week later, another reporter asked him, well, what would you do if you do win?